My mother called me on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, which was the same day every year that she called to confirm final head counts for the dinner, how many attending, any dietary changes, whether I was bringing anything or just myself. For 11 years, I had received this call. For 11 years, I had given her the same answer, which was just myself, which she had written down and worked into the seating arrangement and the grocery list and the particular architecture of a holiday meal that she organized with the efficiency of someone who believed that a well-run table was its own form of love. This year, the call was different. I could hear it in the first 2 seconds. Not in what she said, but in the quality of the pause before she said it, the kind of pause that exists when a person has rehearsed the opening of a conversation and is deciding in real time whether the rehearsal was adequate. She said that Cassidy had reached out to her the previous week. She said that Cassidy was going through a difficult period and had asked, specifically, whether this Thanksgiving could be a peaceful one. She said the word peaceful the way people say it when they mean something else, when they mean uncomplicated, which means uncontested, which means without the presence of the person who complicates things, which in our family had been my designation for as long as I could locate the beginning of it. My mother said she hoped I would understand. She said it was just this one holiday. She said Cassidy needed this. I want to tell you what I noticed in that phone call because the noticing matters. She did not say I had done anything specific. She did not name an incident or a conflict or a particular exchange that had produced a need for my absence. She said Cassidy needed a peaceful holiday and presented my not attending as the logical mechanism for producing one, which meant that in the operating logic of my family, my presence and peace were mutually exclusive categories, and this had become so established that it no longer required justification. It simply required notification. I told her I understood. Not because I agreed, because the sentence was true. I did understand. I had understood for a long time with increasing clarity exactly what the mechanism was and how long it had been running and what it had cost. I understood it the way you understand something that has been happening to you so gradually that the full picture only becomes visible when you step far enough back to see all of it at once. And by then the stepping back has already happened, and what you're left with is not shock but the specific tiredness that follows a very long recognition. I told her to enjoy the dinner. I told her to tell Cassidy I hoped she felt better soon. I told my mother I loved her because I did, in the complicated way you love people who have caused you harm they cannot fully see and may never fully see, and love and harm are not mutually exclusive any more than presence and peace are. It is just that my family had only ever been comfortable with one of those equations. I hung up and sat with the phone in my hand for approximately 10 minutes. Then I opened my laptop. Before I tell you what I wrote, I want to ask you something. What does the clock say where you are right now? Where are you listening from? Because what I am about to read to you is not a story about revenge, though it may look like one from certain angles. It is a story about what happens when the person who has been keeping the peace by absorbing the cost of it finally produces a receipt. I want to tell you something about the letter before I read it to you, because the context matters in a way the letter itself cannot contain. I had been keeping notes for 4 years. Not deliberately, not as a strategy. The way I kept them was the way most people keep things that hurt them, which is imperfectly and without a clear purpose. In the back pages of journals and the drafts folder of an email account and the notes app on my phone at 2 in the morning when something had happened that I needed to put somewhere outside my own head before it became the kind of thing that lived there permanently and changed the shape of everything else. I had never intended to compile them. I had never intended to send them to anyone. They existed the way private documentation exists, as a record for the person keeping it rather than for any audience. What my mother's phone call did was give me a specific occasion. Not a reason. I had always had reasons.
En occasion.
A moment that had a before and an after, that had a shape clear enough that what I had been accumulating for 4 years finally had somewhere to go. I wrote for 3 hours. I did not write in anger, which I want to be precise about because anger is the easiest assumption and also the least accurate one. I wrote in the specific register of someone who has decided to be precise about something they have been imprecise about for a long time because imprecision had been the courtesy that made the dynamic possible, and I was done extending that particular courtesy. I used dates where I had them. I used direct quotes where I had written them down close enough to the moment that I trusted them. I used the word cost deliberately and repeatedly because cost was the frame that organized everything else, not what had been done to me, but what it had required of me to accommodate it, which is a different kind of accounting and a more accurate one. The letter was 4 pages. I addressed it to my mother, my father, my Aunt Patricia, my Uncle Dennis, my grandmother on my mother's side who is 81 and attended every Thanksgiving, and who I loved without complication in a way I could not say about anyone else in that room, and my cousin Lena, who was 26 and had been present at enough family events to have absorbed a version of me that I wanted her to have the opportunity to reconsider. I did not address it to Cassidy. That was a decision I made deliberately and want to explain because it was not an oversight. The letter was not for Cassidy. Cassidy already knew everything in it because she had been present for all of it, on the other side of it. The letter was for the people who had been present also, as witnesses, and who had been allowed by the family's operating logic to remain witnesses rather than participants, to watch the dynamic function without ever being asked to name what they were watching. The letter was for them. I am going to read you the letter now. Not all of it. 4 pages is longer than I can reproduce fully here, and some of it is specific to people and events whose full context would require more explanation than this story has room for. But I am going to read you the parts that matter, which are also the parts that reached the table before the turkey was served. To my family, Mom, Dad, Aunt Patricia, Uncle Dennis, Grandma Rose, and Lena, I am not coming to Thanksgiving this year. You know this because Mom called to tell me I wasn't welcome, which is a different thing than choosing not to come, and I want to name that difference clearly because it has been blurred for a long time, and the blurring has not served any of us well, including the people it was designed to protect. I am not writing this to argue about the holiday. I am writing it because I have been asked to be absent enough times that I believe I am owed an accounting of what the absences have cost, not to me emotionally, but in measurable, specific terms that I think this family has not been asked to look at directly. In 2019, I did not attend Easter because Cassidy said the previous Christmas had been tense and she needed a reset. I had already bought a non-refundable flight from Portland. I lost $340. I told no one I lost it because I did not want to make the situation more complicated than it already was. In 2020, I did not attend my grandmother's 78th birthday dinner because Cassidy called my mother 2 days before and said she was not ready to be in the same room as me following a disagreement we'd had at Thanksgiving that year, a disagreement which, for the record, began when Cassidy told our father that I'd borrowed money from her and not repaid it, which was not accurate, and which I attempted to address at that dinner, which was the moment that became evidence of my creating tension. I miss my grandmother's birthday. I have not gotten that back. In 2021, I was asked to leave Christmas dinner early, not because of anything that happened at dinner, because Cassidy texted my mother from the table. I know this because my mother's phone was visible from where I was sitting, and 20 minutes later my mother came to the kitchen where I was helping with the dishes and said Cassidy was having a hard time, and could I perhaps make an early night of it. I drove home at 7:15 on Christmas Day. I ate the food I had brought to contribute to the dinner alone in my apartment because I had not thought to keep groceries at home for a holiday I had expected to spend with my family. In 2022, I was not invited to the 4th of July gathering. I found out it had happened from a photograph my cousin Lena posted, which I was not tagged in. When I asked my mother about it, she said it had been a small thing last minute. She had assumed I was busy. I had not been busy. I had spent the 4th of July alone in Portland because I had not made other plans for a holiday I expected to receive an invitation to. In 2023, I was asked not to attend Cassidy's birthday dinner because Cassidy said my presence made her uncomfortable. I had sent a gift in advance. I do not know if the gift was mentioned at the dinner. These are 5 examples. I have more. I am giving you 5 because 5 is enough to establish that this is not a pattern that exists in my perception or my sensitivity or my difficulty accepting conflict. It is a pattern that exists in dates and costs and specific requests, and it has been running long enough that I think the people sitting at that table on Thursday have a right to know what they have been participating in, even if participation felt from the inside like simply keeping the peace. Keeping the peace has a cost. It has always had a cost. The cost has always been paid by one person, and that person has paid it quietly enough that the rest of you have been able to believe it was free. I am not angry. I want to be precise about this because I know this letter will be described as angry, because letters like this are always described as angry, because anger is the frame that makes the contents dismissible, and I would like to make the contents as difficult to dismiss as I can. I am not angry. I am tired in the specific way of someone who has been asked to be smaller than they are for long enough that the asking has become the texture of the relationship, and who has finally decided that the relationship, as it is currently structured, does not have room for the actual size of what I have given it. I love you, all of you, including the ones this letter is hard to receive from. I am sending it because love without honesty is a performance, and I have been performing for 11 years, and I would like, if it is possible, to stop.
Jade.
I sent it on Wednesday morning. I sent it by email, which I want to explain because some people in my family would later say that the email was itself a form of aggression, that a real conversation would have been a phone call, that choosing email was choosing a weapon rather than a dialogue. I chose email because I wanted a record of what I had said, and when I had said it, and because every phone call I had ever had with my family about anything difficult had been followed by a version of the conversation that did not match my memory of it, and I was done contributing to that particular gap. I sent it at 8:47 in the morning. Thanksgiving was the following day. By the time the turkey went into the oven on Thursday, every person on the recipient list had read it. I know this because my grandmother called me at 9:15 Wednesday morning, 48 minutes after I sent it, and she was crying in the way she cried at funerals. Not dramatically, but with the specific, held quality of someone who has just understood something they wish they had understood sooner. She said, "How long has this been happening?" I told her 11 years. Conservatively. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I told her the honest thing, which was that I had not been sure she would believe me. She said she would have believed me. I told her I hadn't known that, and that the not knowing was itself part of what the letter was trying to describe. She said she understood. I believed her because my grandmother was 81 years old and had spent 8 decades developing the specific skill of understanding things she would have preferred not to understand, and she applied it now with the same quiet precision she applied to everything else. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was better than I had been on Tuesday, which was true. She said, "I'm going to say something at dinner." I told her she didn't have to. She said, "I know I don't have to. I want to." I spent Thanksgiving alone, which I want to describe accurately, because alone is a word that carries assumptions I do not want to attach to this particular day. I was not lonely. Loneliness is the condition of wanting company you do not have, and what I had on that Thursday was something closer to its opposite, the specific quality of a day that belonged entirely to me, in an apartment that did not require me to manage anyone else's comfort, cooking food I wanted to eat at a time I wanted to eat it, without the particular alertness that family gatherings had required of me for 11 years. The alertness of someone who is always partially monitoring the room for the signal that the evening is about to require something from her. I made pasta. I watched a film I had been meaning to watch for 3 months. I called my grandmother at 4 in the afternoon, which was the time she usually finished dinner, and moved to the living room, and she answered on the second ring. She told me what had happened. I am going to tell you what she told me in the order she told me because the sequence matters. My mother had read the letter at breakfast on Wednesday. My father had read it at lunch. By the time my aunt and uncle arrived Wednesday evening for the pre-Thanksgiving gathering my mother organized annually, both of them had read it, because my mother had forwarded it to them with a message my grandmother described as asking them to be aware of the situation before they arrived. My cousin Lena had read it Wednesday afternoon and had texted me. I had seen the message but had not responded yet because I did not know what to say to her, not because I was withholding but because I was still finding out what her response was going to mean before I decided what it meant to me. Cassidy had read it. My grandmother did not tell me how she knew this. She said she knew it the way she knew most things about Cassidy, which was by watching her face during the moments when Cassidy did not know she was being watched, and that what she had seen on Wednesday evening when Cassidy arrived at the house was the face of someone who had been holding something for several hours and had not yet decided what to do with it. The dinner itself, my grandmother said, was quiet in a way that it had not been before. Not the silence of conflict, the silence of people who are in the same room with a piece of information that has changed the size of the space between them and are adjusting to the new dimensions. My father had not said much. My Aunt Patricia had said less than usual, which my grandmother noted because Patricia was not a person who said less than usual. My Uncle Dennis had helped with the kitchen more than was his habit, which my grandmother had interpreted as a man finding something to do with his hands while his mind worked through something he had not finished working through. Cassidy had been present but quiet. Not her usual quiet, which was the performative quiet of someone who had decided not to engage with something beneath them. A different quiet. My grandmother described it as the quiet of a person sitting with something that does not have a comfortable position. At approximately 2 in the afternoon, which was between the appetizers and the main course, my grandmother had said what she had told me she was going to say. She had not announced it or prefaced it. She had simply said, in the particular voice she used when she was going to say something that was not a question. I want to talk about Jade's letter. My mother had said this was not the time. My grandmother had said, "It is exactly the time, because the time has been 11 years coming, and if we wait for a better one, it will be 11 more." I want to tell you that my grandmother was 81 years old and had buried a husband, a brother, and a child, and had developed through the specific education of those losses a very clean relationship with the question of whether something needed to be said now or later. Her answer, after all of it, was almost always now. Later was not a resource she trusted in the way she had once trusted it. The table had gone quiet. My grandmother had taken a sip of water and looked at Cassidy and said, "Not with anger." My grandmother did not do things with anger. She did them with the precision of someone who had learned that accuracy was more durable than heat. "Your sister lost $340 on a flight she couldn't take because you needed a reset at Easter 2019. Did you know that?" Cassidy had said she hadn't known. My grandmother had said, "She didn't tell you because she was protecting the peace." That is what Jade's letter is about. It is not about the money. It is about what protecting the peace required of her, and what it cost, and the fact that none of us asked. My mother had said that things were complicated, that both girls had contributed to the dynamic, that it was not as simple as the letter made it sound. My grandmother had said, "When was the last time we asked Cassidy not to come to a family dinner?" Silence. "When was the last time we called Cassidy the day before a holiday and told her she wasn't welcome at the table?" More silence. The kind that is not the absence of an answer, but the presence of one that nobody wants to be the first to say out loud. My father had put his fork down. He had a habit, my grandmother said, of putting his fork down when he was about to say something he had decided was true regardless of how the room received it. He said, We've never done that to Cassidy." My Aunt Patricia had made a sound that my grandmother described as the sound of a person who had been thinking a thing for a long time and had just heard someone else say it and was not sure whether to be relieved or guilty. She settled, apparently, on both simultaneously, which is where most honest people land when they finally hear something accurate about a situation they have been watching without naming. Cassidy had not said anything for a long time. My grandmother told me this without editorializing, just as a fact, that Cassidy had been quiet while my father spoke and while Patricia made her sound, and while my mother attempted twice more to introduce the idea that this was complicated and both sides had contributed. At a certain point, my grandmother said, Cassidy had looked at her plate and said something so quietly that my grandmother had not caught the first word and had asked her to repeat it. Cassidy had said, "I didn't think she minded." My grandmother had looked at her for a long moment. Then she had said, in the same precise, unheated voice, "She minded. She has minded for 11 years. She minded quietly because she loved us and because she had been taught, by the way this family responded every time she didn't stay quiet, that minding out loud cost more than it was worth." My mother had started to cry. Not in the managed way, my grandmother said, in the real way, the way that arrives when something has been held for long enough that the holding and the releasing become the same motion. My grandmother had given her a moment and then said, "I'm not telling you this to make anyone feel terrible. I'm telling you this because Jade did not write that letter to punish us. She wrote it because she ran out of other ways to be honest, and we gave her 11 years of reasons to believe honesty would cost her more than silence." My father had asked, after a long pause, whether I had answered any of the messages people had sent me. My grandmother told him I had answered hers. He had nodded and looked at the table. Then he had said, "I'm going to call her tonight." He did. He called me at 7:43 Thursday evening, which was after dinner had been cleaned up and the house had settled into the particular quiet of a holiday evening, and he said something I had not heard from him in the direct, unmanaged form he said it in. He said, "I don't think we handled this well. I don't think we handled it well for a long time, and I don't want to make a speech about it right now because I don't think a speech is what's needed. I just want you to know that I read the letter, and I believe it." I told him that was enough for tonight. He said, "Is it?" I told him it was enough for tonight, that some things needed more than one conversation to repair, and that I was not going to use his phone call to do the work of 11 years in 40 minutes. He said he understood. I believed him. I want to tell you what happened with Cassidy because I think it is the part of the story that people will want the cleanest version of, and I want to be careful about giving them that because the clean version would be dishonest. Cassidy texted me on Friday morning, the day after Thanksgiving. The message was 4 sentences. She said she had not understood the scope of what her requests had cost. She said she had told herself the requests were reasonable because she was struggling and struggling people needed accommodation, and that somewhere in that reasoning she had stopped asking whether the accommodation had a limit. She said she was sorry. She said she did not expect the sorry to fix anything, which was the most accurate thing in the message and also the most honest thing Cassidy had ever said to me directly. I read the message 3 times. Then I put my phone down and finished my coffee and thought about what an apology means in the context of 11 years, which is not nothing and not everything. It is a beginning, if both people decide it is, and a data point if they do not, and I was not yet certain which of those it was going to become. I wrote back 1 sentence. I said I had received the message, and I needed time. She said she understood. That is where it stands. Not resolved, not unresolved, in progress, which is the honest word for the state of a relationship that has been reconfigured by a piece of information and has not yet finished reconfiguring. My grandmother calls me every Sunday now, which she did not do before. My father and I have had 2 dinners, which is 2 more than we had in the previous 3 years. My mother and I are in the slow, careful process of talking about things that have not been talked about, which requires both of us to tolerate a discomfort that we are not equally practiced at tolerating, and which is going to take longer than either of us wishes it would. I am telling you this because I want to be honest about what a letter does and does not do.
It does not fix a family.
It does not produce immediate accountability or permanent transformation or the warm, conclusive resolution that stories like this are expected to deliver. What it does, what my letter did specifically, is name the cost. Make it specific. Remove the abstraction that allows a family to tell itself it is keeping the peace without asking who has been paying for the peace to be kept. The cost was mine. It had been mine for 11 years. And the single most important thing the letter accomplished was not changing anyone's mind immediately. It was making it impossible. After the Thursday when my grandmother said what she said, and my father put down his fork, and my cousin Lena sat at a table hearing information she had absorbed differently for a decade, to claim that nobody knew. They knew. Now they knew. That is a different thing. And it is the thing that makes every conversation after it more honest than every conversation before it, which is not nothing, which is in fact the only foundation on which anything real can be built. So tell me, if your family had been asking you to sit out the holidays long enough that it had become a pattern with a cost, and you had finally decided to produce the receipt, would you have sent the letter? Or would you have kept absorbing the cost, the way you had been absorbing it, because the sending felt like more than the situation could hold? Thank you for being here through every part of this. Everything you have heard, Jade, Cassidy, Diane, the letter, the grandmother's voice at the table, the phone call at 7:43, is entirely fictional, created for dramatic storytelling, and the kind of emotional reflection we hope leaves you with something worth holding. If this story found something in you, we hope it is this. Peace that is purchased with one person's silence is not peace. It is a debt, and the person paying it is allowed, whenever they are ready, to hand the bill to the room.